Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I am the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment, much these days of which is online. The assessment can be completed online, and teams can be brought together online for virtual conversation and connection, something that I'm very big on. You're going to see me looking off to the side and bringing people in from the weight room. I'm also the founder of the HR Hot Seat Inclusive Mastermind community. We have over 2,600 members in 10 different chapters around the country. We are a community of real HR pros solving real HR problems, as we say. We engage in unique mastermind style conversation entirely for free, and these days entirely virtually in all of our chapters. So if you want to learn more about HR Hot Seat, you can go to hrhotseat.com and watch a couple of the embedded promotional videos that you'll find on the webpage, one of which was produced by our special guest today. You were here for a Harmony Insights lunch date, as I said before. It's something that I've been doing since late March, early April to reconnect with people who really inspire me. And then I've invited you along for these conversations.
But Erich always has lunch dates.
I always have lunch dates. They're happening more regularly previously, and these days they're about once or twice a week. But the guests that I'm inviting on are no less inspiring. And our special guest today is Elena Valentine, who is the co-founder and CEO of Skill Scout. I paused for a moment, Elena, because I wanted to make sure that I had gotten your title right. Did I?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. Elena, I am thrilled to have you with us. I've already mentioned you're the CEO and co-founder of Skill Scout. I would love for you to let people know who you are and what you are all excited about today.
Yeah, so it's Skill Scout. We exist to capture the humanity of all jobs because everyone has a story of work and why it's meaningful. And we see it as our roles as workplace filmmakers to capture those stories with reverence, humility, and curiosity. So that's our creed.
So have you been working on that, or is that evolving, or is that what you've been using for a while? Because it sounds new to me.
No, it's evolving, I think, but that's really the mission of why we exist, right? Yeah. And when we talk about our stories, it's never about the how; it's really about the why.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can bring that up, the better. So that really is our essence. We eat, sleep, breathe the stories of the workplace, primarily leveraging the medium of film. And we've been doing that now for about 6+ years, working in industries and in companies large and small. So from your 5-person manufacturing job shop, suburbs of Illinois, to Nike and Deloitte and Accenture and, all of the other, brands. And so what it really just shows is that, every company, everyone has a story of work.
Yeah.
And that, there's power in film to do it.
I'm really proud to say that Skill Scout has also been a sponsor of the HR Hot Seat Mastermind community, HR Hot Seat Chicago specifically. I came to you months ago, this was August or September of last year, and said, Elena, we are 3+ years old. We do not yet have a promotional video. Your eyes lit up and you saw the potential, and we had a great conversation about it, and you produced something fantastic for us that can be found on the homepage of hrhotseat.com, and then I'll put a link in the chat a little bit area. So I've experienced firsthand, your ability to talk through story and translate that into video for my organization, and I've seen what you've done for others as well. Why I came to you, as people know, I choose my guests, and my guests choose our topics for these lunch dates. I came to you and you suggested a topic that we have titled From HR Pro to basically Human Resources Pro to Human Storyteller. Why is it that you chose this topic specifically for our conversation today?
Because inevitably, innately, as human resource professionals, that's what we do. We're the gatekeeper of company stories, especially if we think about recruitment, right? We're often the first touch point that candidates and, quite frankly, employees have as they're coming into our organizations that have. And so inevitably, what we find HR leaders doing every day is telling stories. They just don't call it that. And when we do, sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a mystery to it when there really doesn't have to be. There is an art to it, but there's also a science to it. And, because of that, that's why, I'm, super incredibly passionate about this topic. And in particular, I think wanting to see human resource leaders, positioning themselves as storytellers and as workplace storytellers.
I can't speak for the other HR pros on our conversation today, and we'll have people that aren't in human resources that join us as well. But I don't know that I've ever heard that articulated in that way. That HR professionals we're people, right? We're the keepers of the people, and often the relationships, and some other things as well. But I don't know that I've ever heard it said that HR is also the keeper of the stories, and I'm so intrigued to get into that. I would love to start with a quote that you actually provided me, and I don't know how to pronounce the woman's last name. Patty, and then the last name is Digh.
Dig.
Is it just Deeg? Okay. And I've heard this before. I've seen it on memes that the shortest distance between any two people is a story. And you may or may not know that a common theme has emerged from my lunch dates in its meaningful connection, which I am tickled about because that's something that's near and dear to me. But if you look back over the conversations I've had, topics chosen by my guests, in some way, the vast majority of them come back to connection. And here we are today talking about story, which maybe on the surface you wouldn't then assume connection. But then we have this quote that I think is so fantastic: the shortest distance between any two people is a story. What does that quotation mean to you in the work that you do for companies?
So inevitably what we're aiming to do is a couple things. One is to develop meaningful connections and relationships between people, inevitably through the power of story, whether that's owning your own story or finding relatability in others, to reflect on your own work, why, right? Inevitably, we keep coming back every day, at least to the good companies, because inevitably we understand the purpose and we understand the mission behind the work that we're doing. And stories are such a powerful way to do that. It's not the only method by any means, but it's certainly one that has resonance with a lot of people, because the barrier to entry is nothing, because all of us and any of us can do it. I happen to, have a perspective and a skill in one particular medium, which is around film. But it doesn't matter if it's in written form, in podcast, one-to-one. It really doesn't matter. And I think that that's what the beauty of it all is that there isn't one right way to do it.
Yeah. As every time you and I talk, my mind is going in so many different directions, and I know we're limited to 30 minutes, so I want to make sure that I'm asking you the big questions, or the ones that I think that people are going to get the most out of. I don't know if you and I had talked about in the past. I speak a lot on networking, professional networking, especially for introverts. And one of the things that I like to talk about, and I think this will resonate with you, is when you're getting to know people, instead of asking what they do, ask why they do it, which starts off with a story. What is kind of scripted, and you get stuff that's on a marketing page or on their website or on a business card, and it's kind of bland, right? It's uninteresting, and it's scripted and formulaic. You ask somebody why they do what they do, and they pause, and their eyes sort of widen, and they're not quite sure how to respond. And whatever comes next is something that 9 times out of 10 is so much more interesting and genuine and authentic than had you asked what they do.
Yeah, because the why is very hard to rehearse on the fly, because it forces such a deep moment of reflection. And we saw this a lot. I mean, we built our business on the shoulders of small to mid-sized manufacturers of the Midwest. And if anyone knows anything about small to mid-sized manufacturers of the Midwest, these 55-year-old CNC machinists, don't get inundated with self-reflective questions every day, right? Let alone being in an industry that has really suffered from a perceptions gap. Yeah. But that's what it is that it really does provide a forced moment of pause to sit back and ask yourself, why is it that you do what you do? And sometimes it's not just about passion, right? For some folks, this is freedom for their family. right? Sometimes it is something that's just much, deeper outside of yourself, much bigger outside of yourself. To do that. But I think that's kind of the perfect question, because there's a Japanese concept called ikigai, and I am just so geeked out on this concept called ikigai. In fact, there's a lot of just like Japanese cultural concepts that are
I
just
have it
fascinating
printed
to me.
out and hanging
Yeah,
right next to my desk.
yeah.
Tell people what it
Um,
is.
and it's really, and you'll see it in kind of these concentric, lotus circles per usual,
As you're
of
talking about it, I'm going to
the
grab my
convergence.
printout.
Yeah, the convergence of, what you get paid to do, what you're passionate about, what the world needs, etc. Exactly. It's a beautiful thing. Um, and so inevitably, right, my job, I have the best job in the world here, which is that I primarily get to go into workplaces or virtually to, I think capture folks, some of them who have found their ikigai and who can explain it and kind of really talk to the zeitgeist of what that is. And it's a beautiful thing.
Those concentric circles that I have are: one is what you love, another is what the world needs, a third is what you can be paid for, and a fourth is what you are good at. And I've seen versions of this that are just three of those four circles. And then each space where they overlap, you have various words. So for example, if you're just doing what you love and what you're good at, that might be a passion. Or if you're doing what you can be paid for and what you're good at, that might be a profession. But it's where all four of these come together that you have truly rewarding, fulfilling, meaningful work. I want to start, as we often do, or continue, I should say, with identifying a couple of the challenges that you perceive that people have related to our topic today,
Yeah.
related to our ability to tell story and to recognize that there is story to begin with, and then articulate that, whether it's our own story or that we're shepherding or
Mm-hmm.
facilitating in some way
Yeah.
the stories of others. Can I
So there's
start with
three.
one? Or go
Yeah,
ahead. You probably have three already locked and loaded.
I do.
All right, go for it.
So there's kind of three buckets
Yeah.
when we think about this. One bucket is owning your own story, right? You inevitably are the catalyst for this, especially if we're thinking about how might we foster a storytelling culture in an organization that may not have one. There's that. The second is how might we help others own their story? And then the third is what are the tools? What are the approaches that we might leverage to help capture and share those stories out? Those are kind of the three big buckets that typically oftentimes get tackled simultaneously sometimes, or for organizations that are pretty primed. These are folks, HR leaders who are very comfortable with their own stories. This is something that folks kind of talk about all the time. And so inevitably then there just might be the challenge of, well, then how do we actually share this out? That actually in some ways was some of the challenges that we had early on with manufacturers, where they're holding tours all the time with students. They're opening their doors all the time. But inevitably it's, well, then how do we actually codify this so that we can basically showcase ourselves, showcase our stories more often? So I would say those are typically the three big buckets.
And I think anybody who's ever been in job transition is very familiar with the concept of having to tell your story. If you go to a single workshop, you're going to hear some acronym. A CAR is popular. So, what was the challenge you faced? What action did you take? And then what were the results? And then I throw in an L, so I call it a Carl. And then the L is, what is the lasting impact to the organization? And that's really sort of the story. And you could talk about beginning, middle, and end and throw in the arc and all of that stuff. But my guess is, HR pros or otherwise, we're slow to think of ourselves as storytellers. We're slow to maybe recognize that story is such an integral part of who we are and who our teams are, that it's almost, how do I put this? I'm struggling for words at this point, but it's so important, yet the last thing that we come to think of when we think of how effective we can be in the work that we do or the work that we're helping other people do.
And it really shouldn't be, because if we are here to expect others to share their story, tell their story, we have to go first, plain and simple. We have to be models for that. And so if you are going to be someone who isn't going to be open, you cannot expect anyone else to do the same. So much of this is really reliant on the leaders and on, ourselves to do that and to go first. So that certainly, is a big one. And then inevitably it's framing it in a way for others where this doesn't feel like it's a test or a task. Inevitably what this is just talking and getting vulnerable. And that's the scary thing. And I think it's also a generational thing that we're seeing just in the world of work, which is as before things were expected to be separate, right? This is my personal life. This is my professional life. There's a boundary of what I will share. And I think now, as a result of social media, as a result of being so globally connected, we've got 12-year-olds oversharing on TikTok right now, right? Like this is just something that we come to expect. And so I think because of that, there's a level that I'm seeing, especially of younger generations, there's this out with the vulnerability and out with the formalities. Like, this is who I am. This is my story. And it's going to be super integrated.
Especially
so
with
I definitely
work from
see
home,
it
right?
changing. Yeah. So I definitely see this changing generationally, but let's talk about the work from home piece. Cause that's a big thing too, that everyone's, asking about, especially from a vulnerable piece. The truth is as company leaders, we have to recognize that our employees are no longer going onto our turf. We're coming into theirs. We need to respect that what's happening is I'm in my home, and the reality is for some of us that we're going to have children that might be coming in and out. Cats are going to be walking by on my computer, right? Like, work has come to us. Yeah. And it's not that we're working at home. We're working at home in a crisis, and that's very different, right? We're working under very different conditions here. And that's something that certainly needs to be acknowledged, especially if we're thinking about how might we increase employee engagement through storytelling, especially right now.
People have asked me if I'm working at a Marriott, and I say, no, my office happens to be my second bedroom.
Yeah.
that is why there is a bed behind me, but I connect with friends and college acquaintances and professional colleagues and family members all from this seat. And so I love your point about work is now coming to us in a way that I think for some has been a little off-putting, a little nerve-wracking, right? Because now suddenly you're seeing an aspect of me in my home that you might not see before. And others say, holy cow, what potential now for us to understand better who you are, what your story happens to be, what you're bringing to the work that you do. When you can look over here and pull in something that inspires you in your work, in your work setup at home that you would never necessarily bring in to your office.
And here's where, storytelling, and we can talk kind of the trends that, we've certainly been seeing over the past couple of months is, we no longer have those sporadic, in the moment, unexpected water cooler conversations, right? Because that's really the invisible glue of what makes a culture a culture. It isn't like, all right, we're going to be now in a specific workspace and we're going to do a project. It's actually like, hey, I'm headed over to the copier, and then maybe I'll grab a coffee, and then, oh, there's Claire. Oh, let's catch up, Claire. And then, and so that's what we're missing, right? That's inevitably, right, when we think about some of those memorable moments that we've had with colleagues. Sometimes it can be on a very kind of formal, official project, but so often it's these other things, these water cooler conversations, and we no longer have that, which means that we have to be even more intentional with how we connect and engage with people now than we ever have before. Yeah. Because we can't expect that people can just kind of do this on their own and kind of walk about kind of the office in the same way.
I also like what you mentioned earlier about sort of owning it, and whether or not you see this in your job description, owning that you are a storyteller of some sort, or that's part of what you do. And I can't help but think of, especially having been an HR practitioner myself at the corporate level for a number of years, I can't speak for anybody else, but when I thought of story, telling our story, putting together, documenting it in some way, I immediately thought of our marketing department. And I thought, okay, this means we need to engage somebody else. I don't know that I was thinking necessarily that it's not my job, but I was thinking as of marketing as the storytellers. And I love, now that I'm thinking about this and how you've repositioned this, I love that you're almost challenging HR professionals to not necessarily go so quickly to somebody else, but to recognize that they are living and telling and capturing stories, or have the ability to do so in ways that they might not have considered.
Yeah, and the trend is on the rise, right? Like we have recruitment marketing, we have employer branding, we have these hybrid roles now that exist between maybe your traditional HR department and marketing, where we recognize that how you tell the story of your business might look a little different than how you might tell the story as an employer. If you're doing it right, they shouldn't be too different. And that's where I think it can be really powerful, is when, you know, there's either these hybrid roles or mixed, or there's this really, I think, healthy and vibrant and symbiotic relationship between HR and marketing, that really great things can happen. And we're seeing that, we see that in cult brands all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Patagonia is a cult brand. Under Armour is a cult brand. Coca-Cola is a cult brand. The reason why we see these as cult brands is because many of these brands have realized that it isn't just our product that sells what we do. It's the people behind it. It's the behind the scenes. It's the making of. Delta does an incredible job of this. Southwest Airlines does an incredible job of this, where they're really just kind of showcasing who they are, what they do through the stories of their people. And that's kind of inevitably why we get drawn to a lot of these brands. And I think that's where we're going to end up going. And we're seeing this more and more now, even with the trends that we're seeing today, is as a result, you know, the world is watching companies more than ever. They are making buying decisions and loyalty decisions based on how companies are treating their people right now. How you lay off people, how you furlough people, how you're caring for your people. The world, it isn't just going to be candidates or your employees. It's going to be our mothers and our sisters and our girlfriends calling us like, did you see what the F blah, blah, blah company did? I'm over it. Or like, oh my gosh, like what an amazing message from the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And that just makes me, you know, feel more closely connected to our mission and why we're doing what we're doing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what's been really interesting right now is actually the people piece of businesses is up front and center now. And you're seeing companies that are really rising to this occasion and doing it really well, and seeing companies who are absolutely sucking at it.
Yeah.
And that inevitably is the narrative that people are paying attention to.
So people are going to I want to make sure we leave people with actionable tips. And I think we've already gotten into some of them. You identified some of the challenges, you know, how do we tell our own story? How do we help other people? And then how do we articulate, what are the methods in the media by which or through which we articulate these stories? Which leads me to think of one of the challenges I can imagine people facing. And honestly, if you're attending now, chime in with challenges that you perceive, you know, questions that you have so that we can incorporate those. But one of them is, you know, you talked about film earlier being sort of your playground, right? And so people are going to think, well, film, I don't have all this technology and these big cameras and tripods and soft lighting and all of the stuff that I've seen filmmakers use. How can I even begin to tell our story without spending, you know, an arm and a leg on those things? How do you help organizations tell their story without having to break the bank on technology?
Yeah, well, I have a ton of different resources for that. So people just need to send me a message on LinkedIn for exactly what they're looking for. I think part of this is thinking we have to democratize the tool. If we're here to help tell more stories more often, we have to leverage tools that everyone knows how to use. For example, smartphones being one of them, could be computer cams. And so part of it is I think rethinking what we think as professional video and recognizing that, you know, the majority of your candidates and employees will see employee generated content, whether that's video or anything else. as being more trustworthy, as being more authentic than maybe a corporate glossy video. So the data already exists out there that shows that, especially for a lot more kind of in the moment type videos, stories, that doing something on your smartphone isn't bad. And there's a lot of different kind of metrics for how we can raise the level of quality. And I certainly have resources on, different tools and approaches to that. But that's kind of a big one, is recognizing that video can still be as powerful, but not as precious.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I just want to bring this back in, and it takes us back to a point you were making earlier, is that one of our attendees mentioned that she chose to leave a previous job because she didn't miss the water cooler conversation. Like, that was so telling to her that she decided that wasn't the place for her. And I think that what a revelation to have. It wasn't about necessarily salary. It may have come down to some other things, but when she doesn't miss the water cooler conversation, she's thinking, well, are these people I want to work with and for to begin with?
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that we talk about, right? I mean, it's not, we can have these prompts of like, tell me about the moment you found your best friend at work. And but like, there's no expectations here that when I come to a workplace that we have to be best friends and, we have to grab drinks or grab dinner. But, inevitably, I think folks are really realizing both the priorities they're making and how they're spending their time. Yeah. And we're going to be working the majority, unless we're trust fund kids or trophy wives, we're going to be working the majority of our lives. We're spending the majority of our days working. And so, we are seeing, well, okay, if we're going to do that, then at least let me be in an environment where I can really enjoy myself or enjoy the conversations and enjoy the relationships around me.
Elena, it's already 12:30. And I feel like we could go on all afternoon. I say that so often, but I'm glad that's the case, because there's so much more to come. And this is really meant to just get people's feet wet, to have them inspired to learn more about whatever the topic happens to be, follow up with you. And I very much want them to do that. I know there's plenty that we didn't get to, and I'm sorry about that. But if and when people want to connect with you following this conversation, how can they do that? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, by all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll share my email here. If people just have questions literally from the very kind of tactical, like, what do I need to do this? What's the equipment? We have that, to, examples of X, like we've kind of done, everything and anything. So, yeah, we have definitely just lots of resources depending on what you need. But yeah, I mean, the best way, definitely, connect with me on LinkedIn first, and we can just continue to learn from each other.
And as I've mentioned, I'm going to put the URL for the promo video that we have. I've experienced firsthand the work that your organization does and how you've helped us tell our story. And that's something that I'll always be grateful for. And people are learning about, quite often, they learn about HR Hot Seat through that video. And that really then had to be a true representation of who we are and the stories that we tell. And I'm convinced that it is. So I appreciate you doing that for us. What I want to do at this point, people are going to need to go about their afternoon, and I would like to invite people to stick around if you can. If you enjoyed this conversation, got value out of it, and I certainly hope you did, because I know I did, I would love for you to go back to harmonyinsights.com/lunchdates. We have a number coming up throughout August and even into September now. I'm going to be speaking with the founder of the Hacking HR community, Enrique Rubio, about the importance of global collaboration when it comes to human resources. They're not all HR specific, though. I just added to the calendar Brendan Nichols, who is the president of HRA of Greater Oak Brook, who is going to come on to talk about growth mindset and how he's incorporated that into his own life and how he recommends that other people do so as well. I'm going to be speaking with somebody else about her year of yes, just saying yes to things that scared the bejesus out of her. So that's going to be a great conversation. There's plenty more there, and I'm so excited about it. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. You just have to go to harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates. I'm going to follow up with everybody who attended today with some resources, some links from Elena, things that she recommends that you check out to make immediate progress in your workplaces and in your careers in terms of seeing yourself and other people as storytellers, identifying those stories and then articulating them to the world in a way that's going to be beneficial to everyone. I hope you'll stick around now to contribute your thoughts and ask questions. If you need to go about your afternoon, please do so with our blessing. We really appreciated having you involved in this conversation. And Elena, my thanks to you for spending this time with us. I'm always inspired by our conversations, and I'm so glad that we could have a lunch date today.
Of course.